You'd expect Trump's overall numbers to be strong too, double digits. But that's not the case here. The overall head-to-head and swing state polling is trending in Biden's favor. In late January, Trump led Biden in the Real Clear Politics average by more than 4 points in the popular vote. That's huge. Now it's down to 0.3 points. Karoline Leavitt, Trump's 2024 National Press Secretary, is here. Karoline, good to see you. Are the court cases, now that they're adding up, now that the former president's spending more time in court, starting to weigh on the poll numbers?
No, absolutely not, Leland. What you're citing is one poll of many. There are more than 100 polls to date that show President Trump beating Joe Biden in a head-to-head matchup. And as you just laid out yourself, President Trump is winning on the issues that matter most to voters.
Karoline, we're going to stop right there because facts matter here. And the fact of the matter is I didn't cite one poll. I cited and I said the Real Clear Politics average of polls. The average in January, Donald Trump was up 4 points. The average today, he's up 0.3 points. How do you explain that 4-point swing?
I was about to tell you, President Trump continues to win on the issues that matter to voters. And those are the issues we will continue to talk about between now and Election Day. Those issues are inflation, because Joe Biden has created the worst inflation crisis in a generation with his tax and spend policies. The second issue on voters' minds is immigration, because Joe Biden has allowed an open border invasion of millions and millions of illegal people that are in every single state and community across this country. And so voters trust President Trump over Joe Biden on the issues that matter to them and that they will ultimately vote on when they cast their ballot on November the 5th. And that is the message we will continue to drive, in addition to the fact that it is a shame for the United States of America that Joe Biden is currently weaponizing the justice system against his political opposition and keeping his political opponent off of the campaign trail in an attempt to interfere in this election. And that's what this case being brought by a Democrat prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, in New York City right now is.
Okay, I'm sorry, I still didn't hear an explanation for why you've gone from up 4 points in the average to now only up 0.3.
We have always said that this is going to be a close race in the general election. President Trump was fighting through a very contentious primary. Now that he is the Republican nominee, Republican voters are rallied around him, more so than Joe Biden's base. I will point out Joe Biden's base is fractured. You see that with the pro-Palestinian protests and Genocide Joe chants that are taking place across this country. And President Trump is also picking up historic margins with voters that will determine this election on November 5th. Those voters are Hispanic Americans across the country, which President Trump is winning. They are independent voters who are swinging towards President Trump by double digits. And it's also African Americans who President Trump is picking up historic gains with right now. So if I were to be anyone in this race, I'd want to be Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, who is viewed as the most weak and incompetent and corrupt president in our nation's history.
Well, the polling at least shows on competency in handling a crisis, other things, a majority, far more Americans favor Donald Trump. Talking about the case today, and to be fair, even Democrats who are major attorneys and defense attorneys and no fans of Donald Trump in New York tell you that it is about as thin as turnip soup in terms of the actual case and the substance of it. How much of this has to do with the framing, right? And we saw today the prosecutors try to frame this as about Donald Trump and tactics rather than about the law. And I ask, understandably, do you all wish that there had been cameras in the court today and that people were watching and seeing the former president sit there?
Well, sure, because they would hear a very strong argument from our defense team outlining that there is no crime. There was never a crime. And this case is being brought by a far left prosecutor in Alvin Bragg, who has promised to spend his political career getting Donald Trump, not getting the violent real criminals who are running free in the streets of this city right now. It is being overseen by a Democrat judge who actually donated money to Joe Biden's campaign, and it's taking place in a Democrat jurisdiction here in Manhattan. This case is a sham, and they not only are persecuting President Trump in this way, they are silencing his ability to speak on it. He now has an unconstitutional gag order where he cannot talk about the witnesses in this case.
But he's not following it.
Yes, he is following it. Absolutely, he is following it. Believe us, there's a lot more that President Trump could expose about the corrupt actors in this case that he is not allowed to do because of this unconstitutional measure, which was handed down by a Democrat partisan judge.
All right. Well, we'll see the hearing tomorrow. Karoline, thanks for making it over. I know you were hustling in traffic. We appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.